The information provided on lifeinterruptedradio.com is for educational purposes only.
Welcome, everyone, to the Autoimmune Hour, Surviving to Thriving with Sharon Sayler. I'm your host, Sharon Sayler from SharonSayler.com, and it's my pleasure to be with you here for another episode of the Autoimmune Hour. Oh, my goodness. I've got some chai tea over here with almond milk, and if you, I know it's my go-to. I used to do a wider variety, but I just found something that I really like, and I'm sticking with it. How does that go for you? Anyway, if you want the recipe for almond milk, homemade almond milk, just drop me a quick note at understandingautoimmune.com. Contact us, and I'm happy to share it with you. It's so easy, so easy. Oh, it just makes the tea taste great. I hope you're having a great week. We have a brand new episode for you. We're going to talk about something a little different, and that's contacting our body, talking to our body, understanding the body's messages. And is it really trying to tell us something? Our guest tonight is not only an expert understanding the body's messages, she helps people with autoimmune challenges to discover sort of the underlying messages that might be keeping us stuck, that might be keeping our body in this autoimmune experience. And she gives gentle, loving guidance to help us feel better, to help us understand what's going on at a deeper level. As well as she is a thriver herself from fatigue, chronic fatigue, and Lyme disease. And so she's going to share a little bit about her journey from surviving to thriving as well. It's quite a long journey where she took a while for people to really understand what was going on for her. I think a lot of us can relate to that. We've had symptoms for a while that were just sort of underlying, but no one could really diagnose. So she's been there. She's going to share her thriving story with us as well. Her name is Miriam Dow. So welcome, Miriam. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Miriam, tell us a little bit about chronic fatigue and Lyme. Did they both happen at the same time, or?
That is a very interesting question. No, they did not. I had chronic fatigue from the time I was 16, and I was functional though. I was fairly miserable, to be honest, but I was functional. You know, I finished high school and I held a job and I went to college. So for the first 12 years of having autoimmune problems, I was just this vague, undefined, I'm exhausted all the time, I have brain fog, that kind of a thing. I remember coming into high school one day and finishing chapel and just going to the bathroom and throwing up. I was so exhausted.
Wow.
I was not a happy camper. My body was not a happy camper, obviously, but I'm a very strong-willed person, and I was just, push through. And so that was like the first section of my autoimmune illness. And then I got to college, and again, it was the push thing, and my body was not getting any better. It was actually getting worse because I was not paying attention to what it was telling me at all. I was getting maybe 5 or 6 hours of sleep a night, and I would wake up and I would be in so much pain, and I would have to force myself out of my bunk to go, but I would do it, and I would just push through. Forcing is not a good thing. I think all of us who recover from autoimmune know that by now. Forcing is a terrible thing to do to yourself, especially if you're doing it consistently. But then I graduated, and I was actually slated to start my master's degree in the fall, and I had the GA-ship, what do they call them, TAs, however you term that. I had a grad assistant job, and I worked the summer, and 2 weeks before classes, I got out of bed one morning, and forcing wasn't an option anymore. My legs were shaking. I was holding on to the chair. My body was just, walking to breakfast was not an option, much less going to work.
Right.
And so that was like the before and after of, I know I have chronic fatigue and I'm forcing myself to function, to oh God, what do I do now?
I think we've all come to those reckoning moments with autoimmune where you're finally like, yeah, something is absolutely wrong. It is not all in my head.
Exactly. It's like, yeah, no. And there were obvious signs of distress in me. I mean, not just the weakness, but there was signs that my liver was under stress. My liver was hurting. It was throbbing. I was in a good deal of physical pain. It seemed to be generalized at the time, like my back hurt, my shoulder hurt, but it's these vague symptoms, and I go to the doctor, and the doctor's like, here, have a stomach relaxer. And honest to God, all I had going for me at that point was diarrhea. I mean, I don't mean to gross people out, but if I had been constipated, I don't know what my body would have done, because it was struggling under such a load of toxins at the time. And so I didn't take that. But at that point, I realized, okay, the doctors are not going to be able to help me. And God bless the man. He was a lovely person. And he really wanted to help me. It wasn't like he was, he was being mean or anything. It just, he didn't know what to do with me, because, my tests were still subclinical as far as my liver went, as far as my adrenals were functioning. I mean, obviously I can tell that something's wrong, but the bell curve was not showing that there was something wrong. So the doctor's like, can't do anything for you.
That's what I love when they say, oh, your test is normal, and the range is like 50 to 250, and you're like 53.
Yes.
Like, yeah, well, yeah, okay. My toe is in the normal range. Thank you. It is a frustrating thing, and I know how frustrated doctors get too. Any caregiver gets frustrated, because they are like,
really
but it
want to help. I know. And so I got home from that, and I was like, well, I can lay here for the rest of my life, and check out early, because if I had done that, I know I probably would have just, done something so that I would have passed over. There's no question in my mind that's what would have happened, because I was beyond the limit of tolerating this physical state I was in. Or I can find a way to heal myself, and it was kind of like, well, check out, find self-healing, check out, find self-healing. I think we'll go with the self-healing bit.
So what was that moment? When I'm sure, like many of us thrivers, that you went through a whole list of modalities, and I know you're trained in several of them. What was that moment where the light bulb came on and said, this is the modality that's working for me?
Well, fortunately, several months before, during my junior year, there was a lot of upheaval in my family. There was a divorce happening. There were a lot of things going on in the family that were just very emotionally devastating. And my mom was actually getting out of a very bad relationship. Excuse me, a very bad relationship, and I was raised in a Christian fundamentalist home, and my father was a preacher. So, and they're kind of frown on the energy healing thing, but she had just gotten out of it and gotten some freedom. And so thank God she had gotten in touch with the emotion code, which
oh, that's an awesome book. I love the book.
That is amazing, and it's very scientific. It's very one for one. It's not scary or too woo-woo at all. It's written by a chiropractor. And so she actually paid for my first session with the lady who had introduced her to it. And that was the moment for me, because even though I hadn't reached that wall yet, even though I hadn't, reached my collapse point yet, it was the first time I had ever felt relief.
Wow. Now, we've had Sarah Payton on. We've also had Dr. David Clark. Several interesting guests to reflect back on if this is resonating with you, because this is an important point. I noticed that a number of my people in my community talk about these emotional pain points, I call them, where becomes an either or question. And so we'll continue with Miriam, but I just wanted to interject that if this is resonating with you, also check out Sarah Payton, Dr. David Clark, and podcasts, because this point about emotions and autoimmune is critical. So go ahead, Miriam. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, you're good. That is a wonderful point, because we all do. If we're going to recover from it, you have to come to that mirror moment. It's like losing weight. You have to look in the mirror and say, okay, this is what I look like now, and this is not where I want to be, and how do I get to where I want to be? And it's the same thing. The first thing that the lady said to me when she checked in, because there's a list of things that they check, she said, "You have no will to live," and I just started to cry. I was like, how could you know that? I didn't even know that. But as soon as she said it, I knew it was true. I had no desire to kill myself, but if a car had hit me and I had, and had killed me, I would have been perfectly happy with that. I wasn't worried about it.
Well, that's how the common thing is I hear too. It's interesting about this knowing part. Years ago, I had a dear friend and I were talking, and we both said almost at the same time, we were laughing. It was, well, the obvious isn't obvious until commented on. And for many people, when they're going through a lifelong condition, or what feels like lifelong, I know it started in your teen years, but that, feels like a lifelong thing.
Mm-hmm.
So many things are no longer obvious to us because we're putting up with, we're tolerating, and we're just, as you said, just trying to get through. And I that's a real common denominator I find with people with autoimmune, is that point of sometimes the obvious isn't obvious until commented on. It's wonderful that you found someone to point that out
Yes.
to you, because what a moment of reckoning.
Yes, because I began to realize that was the point when I knew, okay, this is no little thing. If I have come to a point where I have no will to live, then there's a lot more going on at the surface than I am even acknowledging,
Yeah.
And so
was that the moment that you became aware of your ability or your desire in energy healing?
It was an amazing moment for me, because it was the first time somebody had said a truth to me and I felt it through my body. Like, it wasn't a question of, is this true or not? It was a statement that was made, and from top to bottom, from subconscious mind to cellular memory to everything, I felt it shudder through my body, like, this is truth, undeniable, absolute. Yes, this is true. And it was the first time I had actually consciously been aware of feeling a truth in with my entire beingness, and being aware that my body could recognize what is true. And I learned a lot about that later. Like, that was the beginning of a journey for me in understanding how my body works and how I can communicate with it. But at that time, all I knew was there was a visceral response to this comment and to a lot of things she said that day, and it was a 60-minute session, and I got done and I was like, wow. And that moment of hope there, that moment of understanding that I can feel better, was what took me in that moment when I finally collapsed to, there is something I can do for myself. This is not hopeless. I can find my way out. So, back in my junior year, kind of like that foundation was set up so that when I needed it, I wasn't going to lay there in bed and go, oh my God, I can't get up, and just give up. So that's kind of how it went for me.
Fantastic. Amazing. I always find that, and in my own story, there were these turning points of recognizing something, and that at that moment, everything changed. And that's what I find is so fascinating about how the body heals, whether, that it has to be connected to the mind, body, and spirit, all have to have that moment of reckoning to where all of a sudden everything changes. And those are the critical moments to pay attention to. We need to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to talk to Miriam a little bit more about how we talk to our own body. She's an expert in understanding what is the body saying, and she helps clients understand what their body is saying to them, as well as helping them get in touch with being able to talk to their own body. So we'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to the Autoimmune Hour, Surviving to Thriving, and I'm here with a real thriver who's been through chronic fatigue and Lyme disease, and we've been sharing her story about when she had that seminal moment of where everything changed for her, and she realized that the important part of healing was being able to communicate with the body. What does the body need? What are those absolute truths about your body, not everybody else's body, like statistics are in certain communities. Certain sciences give you, I remember when I was diagnosed, I got a list of outcomes, and I was told to get real, that this would be my life. Now, if I'd accepted those, yeah, now, if I had accepted those, the problem would have been that those were stats. And that is not how I was going to be. I was not going to be one of those stats. When someone tells you an outcome, it's a generalized statement of stats. And you can always say, thank you for telling me, but that's not me. So the important thing after that is to know what is it that your body needs. So we'll talk to Miriam now about understanding how do we understand what our body needs. I love that you shared, Miriam, that moment where you said it was, you knew that that was truth. It was every cell was going, yes.
Yeah.
Now, how does someone, I think, I'm very intuitive and empathic. I'm always been in touch with my body, but I really wouldn't know how to train someone to know that. I think I was born this way. So how do you help people understand what messages their body is sending?
Well, it's something that we all do. I mean, you know when you're thirsty, and you know when you're hungry, and you know when you're doing a trip. Yes, at this next gas station, I not only have to get gas, I have to take a bathroom break. So we have that visceral communication going on with our body all of the time. It's just taking that and fine-tuning it, really. And I find that kinetic testing, sway testing, and there's actually a lot of ways you can do that. And if you get
kinetic testing, I just want to jump in here. Kinetic testing, you mean like muscle testing?
Muscle testing, yes.
Okay, great.
That's what I began to do. I began to muscle test everything I ate, whether I should go out or stay home. Choices in relationships, even sometimes. If I had a certain relationship where I needed to set boundaries, I was really checking in and just, okay, what is my body telling me about what I need to do in this situation? This is what I've done in the past, and this is what my options are in this moment. Can we do this? Can we do this and be okay, or is that actually going to be hurting myself? That kind of a tuning in. And really, it begins with the breath. Everything begins with the breath, because when we're healing or when we're tuning in, you always come into meditative state in some way. And you don't have to sit there for 5 minutes and meditate to do this. Taking a few deep breaths and just feeling how you're standing or sitting. Because if you come to the space with sway testing in particular, where you have to be is where you're feeling your body autocorrect. We're never standing absolutely still. There's always, our balance is always being readjusted by our body just a little bit so that we can stay on our feet. And so if you take a few deep breaths and you tune into that space, you don't even have to sway test. If that's not something that, you feel you can master, but to come to that space of quieting the breath and then checking in with the body itself, whether that's the heart space, whether that's the gut, wherever you feel emotion, wherever you get understanding from, because we all have that go-to space. And if each of us stopped a moment and really thought about it or felt into it, we would automatically know where that is.
Oh, fascinating. Now, we're talking about two different things. So when we're doing a sway test, if we want to practice that with ourselves, are we standing or sitting or lying down?
You are, well, you could be either, but I would recommend standing to begin with because the sway is more obvious that way. Um, the theory behind that is, and it's I found it to be true over and over and over again, is that the body knows what is true and what is false. You know, if you are in good balance and you're in a good space of breathing and connectivity, and you say your name, you sway forward a little. And if you say your name as if you say, I say my name is Miriam, I move forward. I say my name is Susan, and I go back. No, that's not true. My body identifies as Miriam, not as Susan.
Oh, fascinating.
So you can ask, and it's good to use a question that's obviously wrong. Given an obvious no, it kind of gives you a baseline to understand it. But yeah, and you begin to tune in that way because your body knows what is true. It's actually even a lie detector test. You know, if you get good at it, you can begin to tune into other people, not like invading their privacy, but if somebody tells you something and it feels off, you can actually, sway it to see if maybe they thought it was true, but your body feels that that was not true, or maybe they really are lying to you. So it's kind of a basic lie detector as well, if you want to get into that. But
now, I would imagine there on that, just to quickly, that seems like it would be a much finer skill set because that would happen so quick. If I'm asking myself the questions, I'm waiting for the response. So I'm attuned to like, okay, this, then that. So my mental acuity is prepared for this, then that. But I'm thinking if I'm watching someone else or we're engaged in conversation over tea, and then all of a sudden I'm like, wow, it would take a little bit of, to me, that's a higher level because it's like, wow, it's not a this, then that, because I would see my reaction to it and then I would have to do the whole thought process. But that's neither here nor there, I guess, on that one. But it's fascinating to me, this idea of projecting at one deeper level. And I just wanted to point out to my beautiful community, that's probably like
it is higher.
101, that's probably like 401 class.
Yes, that is a different level. Yeah, but you could take it there. Is what I'm saying. Yeah, but absolutely. But yeah, start with yourself and just see, because sometimes it's okay for me to have ice cream and sometimes it's not. And some mornings it's okay for me to have coffee and some mornings it's not. And some mornings I put sugar in my coffee and some mornings I use stevia, it really is, and you don't have to be at that level. Start with one thing, start with maybe your kitchen. What in this kitchen irritates me, and just do like 2 or 3 foods maybe that you eat constantly to see if you sway forward on them, and if so, how far, because the body is more emphatic about some things than others. And see if you sway backward on something, you should not be eating that in that moment. Not to say that you will never eat it again, but maybe it's not good for you. I used to drink soy milk, and
Your body
that's
doesn't like
not
it.
something that my body likes at all. So, it could be anything like that. But yeah, just get in your refrigerator, and when you are going to the store too, first of all, look at what you're attracted to. What display case draws your attention? What do you feel like you have to take home? For me, when I first collapsed, it was peaches. Like that time of year, it was August. I was in South Carolina, and they call Georgia the peach state, but South Carolina has amazing peaches too. And my grandmother had a whole bushel of them. I was staying with her at the time because she was closest to the college I was at, and those peaches were the light of my life. Just being able to get out of bed and kind of wobble down the hall and go to the kitchen and get one of those peaches that was a pleasure. That was a simple pleasure. That was something like, peaches are really good for the liver. like fruit is really good for the liver, and that's kind of what the visceral need that satisfied. But pay attention to that. If you're attracted to cherries, you're probably like, and I was too. I could eat half a bag of cherries at a time when I was really sick. You're probably dealing with inflammation,
Yeah.
because it's taking the inflammation down. But what you're craving, is paying attention to what you're craving and what you feel like you have to have. For years, I ate fruit and cottage cheese for breakfast, and that was because that's what my body could tolerate. That was the protein it could digest. And so coming into this space with food, first of all, and then like gradually breaking it out into, because I spent 7 years learning this process, to where I was able to tune into other people and be able to help them with their problems, not just me, but helping others. So it is a process, but start with food, and that's very basic. And your body is very eager. It's very eager to communicate. It is very eager to help. It is actually too adaptable, because it goes into spaces where we get into pain cycles, and we get into thought cycles, and we get into anxiety cycles, and the body adapts that, thinks it's normal. And so working with the body to break those cycles, working with the body to give it what it truly needs and not what it's adapted to, like you were saying, it's the classic, the frog put into the pot that's cold and then slowly boiled to death. It's the same thing. So just beginning with food and then working towards other things that, helping the body to say, oh, okay, that's where we've been for the past umpteen years, but that's not where we need to stay. And that's the next step, is changing the energy from one state to the other.
Right. And in my experience, I just wanted to point out, it's not always a thought. Sometimes it's a twinge or a tweak or a shudder, or I'm trying to think of everything that's happened. Sometimes I find out that I'm holding my breath, and I have to go, why am I holding my breath?
Mm-hmm.
So the body can be very subtle in the messages it sends you. And as we begin this process, just honor all of those little things that you're like, well, that's interesting. Is that related to this brand new supplement I'm holding in my hand considering taking, or is it something else? And sometimes you have to do it several times as you're beginning to get this nuance, I'll call it, of like, okay, what is my body trying to tell me here? Because I think that's critically important.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought up supplements, because it is absolutely, I love supplements. I've taken a lot of them. I still take a lot of them, but I don't take one thing all the time. My body doesn't need the same thing all the time. So always go with, especially with supplements, always go with, if you get it to your mouth and you're just doing this,
You're pulling back,
good indication you probably not ought to do that.
I've had where it's actually been in my mouth, but I couldn't swallow it. I've actually had it and the liquid in my mouth, but it just wasn't going to swallow.
Yeah.
And I've taken that as a message, like, not now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I hadn't had what we'll term an allergic response to it. This is very different. An allergic response is you get you'll get hives, you'll get, heaven forbid, anaphylaxis, you'll get all sorts of things like that. But sometimes this is much more subtle, and I just call it sort of the not now syndrome. Not that it's it could be. We're not dispensing medical advice here at all, but just to be aware that when your body repulses from something, it's doing it for a reason.
Yes. Yeah, that's a very good way to put it. Thank you. Yes.
Although I wish my body had repulsed when I walked into the poison ivy a few years ago. So, it's not always either I wasn't paying her attention or none of us, I don't know what happened. So there we go. The body sometimes, we're not listening to the messages correctly.
Yeah, sometimes that happens. Even when I'm tuned in, I don't always, you get distracted in a moment, and it's nothing big, but okay, maybe I shouldn't have had that second brownie, And you're like, okay, I that was a little over the top. Note to self, be more, check in, or don't eat the second brownie at all next time. That kind of a thing where you just recorrect yourself, just like your body corrects your balance. You just recorrect yourself a little bit. Yeah.
I think at some level we all know, but it's a matter of trusting it.
Mm.
I think I can think of all the different times I've talked to people where they afterwards they said, I knew, but I didn't trust it or I didn't go with it. What are some things that we can do to help ourselves trust, to learn to do that? Is it just a matter of practice?
Yeah, to some degree. It's a matter of bringing those things into consciousness, because what happens when we say, I knew that, is we see something out of the corner of our eye, you know, and we go past it, you know.
Right.
It's like you set something down on the table and you think to yourself, the way that's positioned, it's probably going to fall. And then you ignore that, and 5 minutes later, what happens? Well, there's water all over the floor. And you say, I knew that, you know? So it's taking that moment and kind of crystallizing it. Ooh, that was something. What was that? And follow that first impulse, because we're talking about following core impulses here and tuning into the core. So yeah, you find a core impulse and you follow it and see if it feels good. And the more often that you follow an impulse and see that the reaction is good, or you don't follow it and you see that it's bad, but it's all about bringing the conscious awareness to that. So once you start watching yourself, and this is something, one of the first things my nutritionist said to me when I got on the phone with her was, observe with curiosity and not judgment.
Oh, that's
Because we judge those impulses. They come to us and we're like, oh no, that can't be true. And as long as you're doing that, as long as you're shoving away, you'll never learn to trust yourself. But if you come to an impulse and don't say, okay, this impulse is good or this impulse is bad, but you just observe it and you observe the choice you made with the impulse and what the result is. Once you come to something with a curiosity and not judgment, you bring that awareness to it, you begin to see the pattern. And when you follow that pattern, you begin to know what you can trust and what you can't.
mm,
So,
I love that. Observe with curiosity, not judgment. And
mm-hmm.
that is an ability of what I call stepping outside yourself, because our snap judgments happen so quickly that we're not
Mm-hmm.
even aware sometimes that we're judging it.
Yes.
So sometimes it
Yes.
feels like you're running two tracks, shall I say, along in your mind, like, oh, that was a judgment. Now flip back into curiosity really quick here, because snap judgments can happen. We don't even know we're
We
having that
don't know it.
bias moment. We can have it and
Yeah.
then all of a sudden be headed down the wrong track. So I love that. Keeping the curious mindset open. That's fantastic. We've teased a little bit before we run out of time though. Just to quickly tell us about, how did you come down with Lyme and how was it discovered?
Well, it wasn't discovered for a very long time. um, I, um, I guess that summer there was a tick bite, because that was why I collapsed. I actually had contracted Lyme. My test came back negative. Um, I was not doing well. I mean, I was in the healing modalities, and I was getting rid of a lot of internal things. I was understanding boundaries, and I was taking care of the spiritual, emotional, mental, energetic part of this, but the physical part went untended for quite a while because I did not have a diagnosis. And, the body kept coming back to that, you have Lyme. And I couldn't even accept that in myself. I'm like, if I have Lyme, what do I do? How do you come back from that? So it was almost like something I couldn't even consider, but it was so interesting to me. As soon as I accepted that, yes, there is a possibility that I have Lyme, within the week, a Lyme specialist was on my doorstep, not at the doctor's office, on my doorstep. He did a physical examination on me. He said the first thing when he walked in the door, he looked at my hands and he said, you have babesia so bad it has eaten all the flesh off the back of your hands.
Wow.
My muscles were jelly. I'd had Lyme for 5 years at this point and gone undiagnosed. My muscles were jelly. I was in severe muscle pain all of the time. Um, if I did the laundry or got a shower, that was a good day for me. It wasn't like, and I was living with my mom at that point. I couldn't, I couldn't really take care of myself, and so that was another recognition moment. Okay, the Lyme is here, and it's not going to get any better if I don't take care of it. And people ask me, how did you get rid of it? And I'm like, how did I get rid of it? Because you have to realize that Lyme is a series of viruses. And it's like bacteria in the system. It becomes imbalanced. Like everybody has Babesia in their system, but not everybody suffers from the symptoms of Lyme. Why? Well, because when the tick bites, it activates certain things, and ticks can have up to, like, I don't know, 15 viruses in their bite. Like you could have that many types of Lyme in your system at once. And it's a matter of bringing the body back into balance. So I did some tinctures, and I did some other things that were physically helpful to me. There were a lot of low-grade infections that had nothing to do with Lyme. That, getting rid of those helped the body to combat it. But really, when you come to an imbalance like that, you do have to ask yourself, how do I bring my body back into loyalty to itself? Because, and this is what I want to address with autoimmune, it's a battle against yourself. The thing itself is autoimmune. It's a civil war, in a sense, inside yourself. And so not fighting the viruses like I'm trying to eradicate them, but how do I bring the body back into balance where the viruses are in the place they're supposed to be in, and I am functioning and thriving again because I'm not dealing with this overbalance into, muscle eating viruses. um, and it took some time. Like it's been 2 years, 3 years almost since that diagnosis, and it took 1.5 at least to where the point where I could sway forward with my body and say, yes, I am Lyme free. I am okay. I am balanced. There are energetic processes you can do to realign the loyalty of your body, because a lot of times, even with something like cancer, your body thinks that it's normal cells, right? And with infections and viral infections, the body begins to think that the virus is the normal thing and the healthy body is what's wrong. That's where the civil war comes in. Which is the true self, the one that is sick or the one that is healthy? And so it's actually coming to a realization that you need to move your energy back into alignment. Now, I'm not saying not to use medicines. You need to do that too. But I'm saying that there's more to it than medicine, and coming back into a space where you're talking to your body and your body understands, yes, these viruses invaded the system. We are strong enough to fight them off. We are strong enough to bring them back into balance within the system and to be okay. So you're no longer identifying with the virus as your norm. You're identifying with your healthy body as your norm. And that is a purely energetic exercise. I've never really seen anybody else who does it quite like I do. There's a lady in with a garden named Paralandra who I read from and began to understand how things can get imbalanced that way. And I kind of like took from her and found my own way into that. But that's how I actually brought myself back from Lyme, not through one medication or one thing. It's like this, doctors think that
that's quite a ball of yarn.
yeah, doctors are like waffles. Have you ever heard of that book, Men Are Waffles, Women Are Spaghetti? And doctors are very waffle thinkers. It's this, it's that, it's the other. But the truth is that when you come to an autoimmune disease, it's like a skein of yarn that you have to untangle one knot at a time. And Lyme is the same way. It's what, again, it comes back to what do I do today to help my body? come back into balance. That's what it comes to. And that skein of yarn, it's like, okay, it's going to take a while to unknot. All right. But it is a skein of yarn. And it does have a beginning and it does have an end. That's the hope. That's the understanding that if you begin one step at a time, you get there eventually, And so, so that's my experience with Lyme. My hands are normal now. My legs are regaining their muscle tone rapidly. I'm taking belly dancing classes. I'm taking swimming lessons. I'm, the activities coming back, and so it's just a beautiful thing to be on the other side and say, yes, you can do this. It's not easy. It's scary at times because you have to go places you maybe prefer not to go in the emotional, mental sense of things, but you can do it, and the journey is not the same for everyone. How I recovered from Lyme is probably not the same as someone else who recovered from Lyme. It depends on which viruses are activated, how they're imbalanced, and how they need to come back. And that's where I work, is with reading that kind of thing and helping them to know individually for them, okay, this is where you're imbalanced, and this is maybe who you need to go see to help restore that balance, or maybe this is what your body needs to do for a while in order to restore the balance. Because I'm not a one-stop shop. I mean, if they need to go to a doctor for something, or I need to recommend a test for somebody, I obviously do that, because I'm not like, the physicality is, there are more experts on that than I am, but I do have the knowingness for myself, and I have really been enjoying in the past few years helping others as well to find that.
Oh, fascinating. I think it also, to understand, I was thinking, I think it was Elizabeth Yarnell we had on a few weeks ago, which described it as our being as a great big bucket. And when we come down with an autoimmune, or like Lyme, a virus type activation, whatever it is, parasite perhaps, it's like the bucket all of a sudden, the body can handle so much. It could be a little bit of stewy and maybe a little bit of something you don't want in this bucket, but all of a sudden something happens, and all of a sudden the bucket begins to overflow. And it's important for us to be able to bring the body back in balance. It's not about eradicating absolutely everything, but getting back to that point where the body says, yeah, okay, we got this. We're back to that point. Yeah, we got this, instead of going like, what's going on?
Yes. Releasing the panic.
Right. Releasing the panic. And understanding that the immune system, part of that with the autoimmune, is it's never made sense to me when doctors say, well, the body is attacking itself. And I've always been a firm believer that the body is such a beautiful, beautiful mechanism that somewhere along the lines, I want to say, it's not intending to attack itself. That's never the body's intention.
No,
it becomes
not at
confused.
all.
It becomes overloaded. It becomes incapable.
Yes.
And we just have to bring it back to the balance that you're talking about, which is both medical intervention, physical intervention, spiritual and emotional, and the mental part of it. It's a full package here to be able to.
Yes, absolutely.
Health is not just one part of this four-legged stool. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So tell us a little bit more about how people can get a hold of you, your website, and how people can begin to chat with you.
You can go to medicalmediummiriam.com. That's my website. And yeah.
No, it's fantastic. Thank you so much, Miriam. It's really critically important to understand it's a process of healing. It's not it's not a sprint, it's a marathon when we have an autoimmune condition.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
after 200 plus episodes, I'm well aware that there are many, 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 many thrivers out there who, as I like to say, they won't tell me I'm cured, but I don't care. I feel great. So
exactly.
as long as I've learned my body, what keeps my body in balance. And I've also learned that what keeps my body in balance may or may not work for your body in balance. We're all different. We've all been exposed to different things throughout our life, whether that's mental, emotional, physical, toxins, the foods we ingest, the people we
Mhm.
hang out with. I know you mentioned boundaries a couple of times, also critically important. So thank you for sharing your message here. That was very interesting about your own journey to becoming a thriver, as well as teaching us about the sway and the muscle testing and understand how we can begin to communicate with our body.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really been a pleasure.
Everyone, be sure and go over to understandingautoimmune.com and get the transcript of the show. Sign up for the Courage Club there, as well as join us on Facebook at Life Interrupted Radio. And we're now on Instagram and YouTube, so join us there as well. While I'm thinking of it, join us at YouTube. We've got great videos over there, not just of our interviewees, but also positive thoughts and little insider secrets at all the time. So join us there as well. Have a great weekend, whatever your adventures. Join me next Friday for another fascinating episode. And as always, enjoy.
The information provided on lifeinterruptedradio.com is for educational purposes only. What you hear, read, and see on Life Interrupted Radio is based on experience only. The information presented here should never be used for any legal, diagnostic, or treatment purposes. Always seek sound legal, medical, and/or professional advice regarding any problems, conditions, and any of the recommendations you see, hear, or read here on Life Interrupted Radio.